Howdy, Brett Martin here, CEO and co-founder of Sonar. It's the easiest way to connect and share with the people, places, and things nearby. Tonight I'm here at the Harvard iLab to talk about the future of proximity, specifically how the sensors in our pocket are going to change the way we interact with the people, places, and things near us every day. Specifically, the offline world is going to become way more like the online world that we're used to, personalized, customizable, and completely interactive. Check it out.
I'm really excited to kick off this spring with a session on mobile. Mobile is so incredibly hot. And Brett's going to talk about mobile, the proximity and sharing, and all the cool things that are going on within that these days. He is the co-founder and CEO of a hot startup in New York City, and he came all the way over here in advance of the storm. I hope you don't get stuck here. So I'm going to turn it over to Brett, and he's going to talk about mobile sharing.
So before I sort of launch into things, let me get a quick overview. Who in here, who's at Harvard, who's undergrad? Who's grad student? Who's community? Hi, community. Love you guys. You guys are dedicated. You're not going to slip out the back door. Okay, who in here is starting a startup right now? All right. Oh, thinking about it. You're business school students, right? Yeah, of course. You guys are startup curious. So, okay, great. And then everyone here came here for what? What? Just shout out what you wanted to get out of tonight. Bravery. It's very valuable when you're starting a startup. Proximity sharing. Okay, great. That was a good one. You passed. Future of Sonar. Okay.
Why other startups aren't really doing as well?
What's wrong with proximity sharing? All right. These undergrads are building a competitor app, so they've probably got the best agenda here. Okay, so I'll get. How does this sound for a plan? I'll sort of walk you guys through this proximity-based presentation I've got. Sort of generally, it's focused towards sort of how it's going to affect marketing, but you guys can apply it to. I'll tie it into how it's going to affect startups, and then I'll leave a little time so at the end of the presentation we can kind of have a little general Q&A, maybe about Sonar, but maybe about entrepreneurship in general, how to get business off the ground, how to raise venture capital, things like that. Does that sound about right? Would that fill everybody's agenda? Yep. Okay, great. So quick background on me. Brett, I'm from Ocean City, Maryland. It's a small mid-Atlantic white trash beach resort town about 8 hours south of here. I went to college about 4 hours north of here, Dartmouth. I graduated. I did equity research at Thomas Weisel, which is a technology-focused investment bank, for 2 years out of college. I quit that. I lived on a sailboat for 7 months, sailed from from Maine to Dominica. It's 6,000 miles at 3 miles per hour. It's incredibly boring. If you want some time to think, I highly suggest it. I then did a Fulbright scholarship in Milan, ostensibly to study the effects of globalization on the Italian textile and fashion industry. If that doesn't sound like a pathetic ex-banker's attempt to go to Milan and hang out with models, I don't know what is. I spent about 2 months in Milan studying the effect of globalization on the Italian textile and fashion industry, at which point I realized that industry is completely screwed. I didn't want to become an expert in that. What I want to do is start a high-tech industry. So I spent the rest of my time learning how to cook pasta and Skyping with American VCs and entrepreneurs. Came back, 2008, great time to get a job. So I spent about 6 months ostensibly writing an article for Harvard Business Review, but generally I was in absolute crippled analysis paralysis, trying to decide if I should start a startup, get a VC job, or go get a PhD. The decision was made for me when I had 10 rounds of interviews at a venture capital firm with 6 people. And finally they said, oh, we're not hiring. So I said, screw it. I grabbed the smartest buddy I had from Dartmouth, moved to Austin, Texas, and locked myself in a closet for 9 months and taught myself how to code. learned a valuable lesson, still great friends with my buddy, but we were terrible business partners, wanted to absolutely kill each other. By which point, when I was ready to kill my best friend, I had also run out of money. So I moved to New York, joined up with two serial entrepreneurs, Daniel Klaus and Kevin Wendell. They started Fox, CNET, eOnline, and iFilm. We launched the first tablet-focused seed fund. It's called App Fund. We did a couple investments, ultimately morphed into an incubator, launched 3 companies, the third of which is Sonar. That's how I got here. So, but first, let's talk about proximity-based sharing. Okay, so first, how do we get to proximity-based sharing? Well, if you look at sort of the history of sharing, right, each evolution or a big advancement in sort of consumer internet is caused by making sharing easier, right? So before, first you went from email, then you went to Blogger, so one-to-many communication, then you went to Facebook and Twitter, where you had sort of microform blogging, then you have Foursquare, which is basically Twitter, except for there's only one type of post, where you just click a button, and then ultimately Pinterest, which is really easy way of repinning things visually. You don't even have to say anything. The most sort of recent advancement in sharing is this concept of sort of frictionless sharing, right? So who knows what frictionless sharing is? Anyone have any examples? So,
It's like if you read an article on ESPN, it'll publish it, you read it to your Facebook account.
Exactly. So that's a great example. Another one is Spotify. So when you are listening to your songs and they're publishing all of my Bieber all over my Facebook page, Spotify is frictionlessly sharing what a terrible music taste I have. But there's a reason it goes toward this, right? It's more and more ways of expressing ourselves, less and less friction to do it. Actually, there's a great example. What's the latest hot sort of way of sharing? What? Vidi. Vidi's good, but Vidi is like 6 months old. Come on, this is the internet pace, man. Anyone heard of Vine? Vine? What? Vine. Yeah, Vine, right? So Vine's the hot new app. Twitter bought it right before they launched. Basically, it enables you to easily create and share GIFs, little 6-second clips. So we can get into this, but if you're thinking about building sort of services, 2 core things always come to mind, which is one, make it really, really easy for people to create compelling content, make it really easy for them to share, and make it really easy for other people to enjoy it. If you're not doing that, it's going to be hard to spread virally, which is, I'll get into one of the reasons proximity-based sharing has had some trouble. So the other sort of tectonic trend is everything's going mobile. I mean, you all probably understand that this is a big trend, but it's still taking some people time to catch on with this. Specifically, the facet of mobile that I want to talk to is that it just makes sharing that much easier, right? Long gone are the days of going on vacation and then hooking up your Canon and then uploading your 50 pictures to the web. Like, no way. People are doing that in real time with Instagram, right? So it's easier to share, and everyone has little sharing devices on them all the time. So when you look at sort of the rapid influx of sharing plus mobile, all of a sudden it becomes implicit. So basically, we're all walking around with these sensors in our pocket that are constantly collecting data from and sharing data with the environment around us. And so that's sort of the stage that I'll set for the rest of the presentation. So what's going to happen when we're all walking around with these sensors in our pocket, right? This is kind of the promise of implicit sharing, is that everything around us is going to become like the web is online. We're going to be able to interact with it in all sorts of new ways. So the 2 sort of core new concepts that we see coming out of this, the 2 graphs that Sonar thinks about, we spent the past 10 years were sort of defined by the concept of the social graph and how the social graph is going to change everything online. 2 new graphs for you guys to think about. One is the proximity graph, which is the people, places, and things that are around us right here, right now. And then the second we're calling the reality graph, which is basically like if you look at the proximity graph over time, what are the people, places, and things that I spend time with on a repeated basis? So those are sort of the two tenets of, was that me? No, someone else. This whole presentation and the change that's going to come. So first, quickly, a quick collection of new applications for proximity-based networks. Proximity-based dating, probably the most obvious. If I were starting a proximity-based social network, I would probably focus on dating. Quick little inside hint on Sonar figures. Hot chicks get clicked on all the time. And it's not just, it's not just men clicking on hot chicks, it's girls clicking on hot chicks. So for whatever reason, that is the most common action that people do in Sonar. Not surprisingly, applications like Scout, it's a proximity-based mobile dating app that I passed on when I was at AppFund. Oops, Andreessen Horowitz recently invested them and put in $22 million. They're growing really fast. They also focused on 13 to 17-year-olds, which was kind of a fuck up because they got in a lot of trouble for that. But they are processing 300 million messages per day. So people like it. Second, proximity-based social discovery. Helping take the efficiency of online networking offline. So the promise is you walk into a conference, and instead of talking to the random person sitting next to you at the nut bowl, you actually can talk to the 5 people that you are most interested in or most relevant to. Payments. Has anyone paid for anything with Square? Awesome. You guys are so futuristic. It's amazing. Have you guys ever have you set up the sort of proximity-based thing when you walk in, they charge your card? Awesome. Okay, so you get this. You'll be able to share money with people nearby. Obviously, proximity creates all sorts of opportunities for new hyperlocal marketplaces, right? And this we can discuss. You guys have heard of Zarly and these guys, right? It's questionable how well they're doing. There's a lot of difficulty with building networks that have you have to deal with space and time, right? So achieving hyperlocal liquidity is really hard because unlike the web, the whole point of the web is to flatten the world and create opportunities for interactions across the world and asynchronous interactions. Whereas if you're trying to create a real-time hyperlocal network, you need to have massive density. So I think you're seeing companies like Zarly that initially tried to go after both sides of the market, try to sort of build big horizontal marketplaces. At first, there's getting way more traction building out sort of verticalized marketplaces. So you're seeing a lot more success for companies like Uber or Exec or even Get a Maid, which is like helping you find a maid, right? It's a lot easier to build liquidity in these verticals and for specialized services than it is to go horizontal like Zarly is trying to. I have companies like Airbnb and GetAround on here because for a different reason. You guys are familiar with the sort of communal consumption concept. One really interesting facet of proximity-based services is that all these communal consumption companies are leveraging the concept of reputation and identity trail that is very prevalent on the internet. And I think you're going to see all sorts of new interesting applications of identity and reputation in the physical world when we carry around our web presence with us in our pocket. So something to pay attention to. This is super interesting, and actually having been in this space for 3 years now, this is getting really hot right now. So everyone's familiar with the Internet of Things? Anyone not? It's all right. You can be brave. So yeah, Internet of Things, all the things we have are going to be connected. So talking a lot about sort of human-to-human interactions, but human-to-machine interactions and machine-to-machine interactions are going to be big. So when I come home, it should fire up the lights and turn on the heat and notify my family that I just arrived, if I had a family. when I leave the house, it should turn on all the locks and turn down the heat. Nest is like a thermostat that's getting a lot of hype. I actually don't know that much about that company. Can anyone say why Nest is getting so much hype? Does anyone know what Nest is?
It lets you save on your energy bills because it can be really efficient about knowing when to turn down the heat or up the.
Saving money is a great way to be hot. People love when you do that. Thank you. Okay, so those are just some applications. There's lots more. All the big hardware companies like Intel and Qualcomm, those guys are all working on sort of proximity-based technologies that they're embedding in their hardware. So they're really interested in managing all those transactions between the machines and the humans, and a lot of money to be made there. So it's kind of an interesting sort of side, tangent to the output of the reality graph and the proximity graph, which is that designers of online social networks have had a really hard time with groups, right? Who uses Facebook groups? Liars. How do you guys actually use Facebook groups? Let me know.
Like our section. So we use it to like talk about events and things like that.
Oh, so like
what do you guys want to do tonight? And then somebody will post something.
like an email list or something like that? Do you guys like share to specific groups?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So which groups do you share to?
Like share what? Share content?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure I do share a group.
No, I'm just playing. I'm genuinely curious if you're using groups. My experience is that no one really uses sort of Facebook groups, or who's using Google Plus to share to specific groups of people? Okay, that's cool. Tell me about it.
I was employee though, so it doesn't count.
You're paid to do it. Man, see, I told you, money is a great way to influence behavior. Okay, that doesn't count. I saw some other hands go up though here.
I'm a emergency resident, and so with residents throughout the world, really, we share content here on G+.
You're an emergency resident?
Emergency medicine resident.
Oh, okay.
So med school. But a training position. So I have a group of people who are all around the world who are emergency physicians who post content, post discussion boards through G+. It's actually been really valuable for us.
Awesome. So is it like a specific community that you always post to, the same group?
Yeah, these are people I want to be in touch with, and other people, it kind of weeds out the people that I don't really want to hear their opinions so much.
You're sick of baby pictures, is what you're saying.
Sick of baby pictures, and also I really don't want a med student to tell me what they think all the time. I don't care what a med student has to say so much. I want to know what another resident on my level of learning, nor a really well-trained physician has to say. I want someone who knows what I need to know now to be able to talk to.
We should talk about filter bubble later, but I got it. It makes sense. I would argue that the way you just described groups and it is really no different than like the message boards that people have been using for years. And when I talk about sort of articulating groups, I mean like you have these group of friends that you talk to about business things, and these group of friends you talk about your family issues, and these people that you go play basketball with, and these people that you go out to dinner with, and these, right? Like no online community has really been successful in capturing the nuances of those groups and enabling people to effectively communicate with them. I would argue that through the concept of proximity and the reality graph, you'll actually be able to translate online. So, because groups are dynamic, right? They're not static. They evolve. They decay. Relationships decay. People come in and out of each group, which is why it's been so hard to date to sort of explicitly define them once, because you have to constantly keep managing them. But a big part of this whole like frictionless sharing and proximity concept is that just your behavior will inform the machine, who are the different groups that you rely on for different things. In terms of staying on top of these trends, I think it's always helpful to look at the underlying technologies, the sort of that underpin them and facilitate them, tends to be something that people who, when you work in a certain layer of the stack, right? If you're like working on the application layer, you tend not to really think too much about the hardware that drives it. But if you look up and down wherever you work on the stack, it helps you really predict what's going to happen in your layer. You guys know that because you're business school students. But so what's driving all this stuff? NFC. My personal opinion is that it's like overblown, and I don't really see that much value in being able to tap something. I just want it to happen for me when I walk in, which is why I think Square is pretty sweet. That said, lots of smart people spending a lot of money on it, so maybe something cool will come of it. I think Wi-Fi Direct is probably a more interesting technology. Wi-Fi Direct is, how in your computer you can sort of see what other computers in the room because they're all hooked up to the same Wi-Fi router. Wi-Fi Direct is device to device. So you walk in a room and my phone can actually see all of your phones, and then we can communicate directly within proximity. That's something that Intel is definitely spending a lot of time thinking about. Google Glass, obviously. I had a new one, which I can't remember. What else is happening? What's a hot new technology that's going to influence how we interact with people right here, right now? Sonar. Oh, I'm talking about more sort of something deeper. What is it? What is empowering Sonar? So,
I like Bluetooth 4.0. It's quite like NFC, but it's very low power.
Yep.
And you can be very precise about what proximity you want to look at.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Smart fabrics like conductor thread, memory foam, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not just so you can play with your iPhone in the cold anymore. No, absolutely. RFID, right? Lots of advancements there. Persistent background location tracking technology in your phone, mapping Wi-Fi to doing reverse geocoding from Wi-Fi networks to locations, all things that are going to empower a lot of this stuff. Okay, so what's going to come out of these technologies, right? How is it going to change the way we interact with our environment? Because that's probably the most fun part or interesting thing to think about. For me, it's a lot of what's happening online coming offline. So one of the biggest things that's going to change is the concept of accountability and measurement in the real world. And I'm sure this is what everyone's talking about with big data, right? It's this, all of a sudden, offline engagements and offline encounters start becoming way more measurable, right? So what's a good example of this? People are hooking up sensors into retail stores that are sniffing all of your Wi-Fi enabled devices that are constantly looking for Wi-Fi, constantly pinging, hey, I'm here. Is there Wi-Fi here? Is there Wi-Fi here? Well, retailers are getting wise to this, installing little sensors, and they're tracking you as you go from store to store. There's a bunch of different ways of doing it. Anywhere you've seen free Wi-Fi, well, there's an agenda there, right? But what it's enabling is, the concept of footfall, which is people walking in and out of a physical location. For years they've paid someone with a clicker to stand in front of the door, and say how many people are walking in front of this. So if you're buying a new plot of land for Abercrombie and Fitch to build a store on, what you do is you send out a scout. Looks around, then they pay a consultant to stand in front of the 2 doors that they're thinking about buying, and he stands there for like 3 hours and clicks on things, right? Now they use Wi-Fi to do that. That's still happening, actually. Plenty of money to be made in that market. So another example? Oh, out-of-home advertising, right? Display and billboards. How do you guys think that they value that? They have no freaking idea, actually. It's completely driven by the market. But nowadays, they're building much more analytics around, being able to look at how many people are walking in front of a billboard. There's a company in New York called Immersive Labs that puts a camera on top of billboards, and it watches everyone that walks by the billboard, does facial recognition analysis on them to see if they're male or female, and then serves up the appropriate ad, and then measures how long people look at it and adjusts which ads they do based on how long people are looking at each one and whether they're male or female. And then they help monetize it better because they have much better measurement system, right? They have more real metrics they can use to sell advertisers. So it's going to change the accountability for offline interactions. Next part is responsiveness. So on the web, right, if something goes wrong, we're like pissed off immediately and immediately are tweeting about it and we want someone to deal with it, right? That's going to increasingly happen in offline interactions. So imagine Best Buy having, instead of having a call center in India, they actually have a big office building full of people staring in front of 3 monitors, monitoring every person that walks into a Best Buy, doing an analysis on them about what their clout score is, what was the last thing that they bought? Are they a big spender? Did they buy that Samsung TV that like overheated after 2 months? Right? Are they going to be pissed off walking in there? This is happening, and all of the brick and mortar retailers right now are looking at this next 10 years. If the last 10 years was kind of the empowerment of the consumer, right? Showrooming. Who's familiar with the concept of showrooming? Okay, so, here we go.
It's like people go into a store to see a product and go buy elsewhere.
Exactly, right? So it's like the scariest word on the planet to big box retailers, right? They're just like, they're all freaking out about Amazon. And that is their biggest thing. So they're looking for ways of leveraging the real world environment to actually fight back. So part of that is actually having a salesperson within walking distance of you. So how can they get more information about the people coming into the store and leverage their presence to sell them right then and there? Either get them to buy in the store or buy online from their mobile website, or even buy in the store and then have stuff shipped back to your house. So there's lots of startups right now that are building infrastructure to transport physical goods same-day delivery to compete with Amazon. It's another kind of hot space. Personalization. So I don't know about you guys, but when I buy something online, I expect to have like 10 of my friends' faces dancing around it telling me how freaking awesome the purchase I'm about to make is. It's probably going to be the same way in the real world. We did actually, like a year after we started, we did this thing with Wired magazine. They have a pop-up store in Times Square every year. And we did a thing where when you walked in, we would analyze all of your social media and your Facebook likes and your Foursquare check-ins, et cetera, and then give you personalized product recommendations about what you should get in the store. Like, oh, we saw you were at the gym. You might want to check out these new boxing gloves with sensors in them. Or we saw that you were checking into lots of bars. Here's a, what was the one? That was really offensive. I'm glad I don't remember. But you get the idea. Personalizing people's real world shopping experiences based on their online information.
Did people like that?
Did they like it? People go there to kind of be weirded out. So it's not a representative sample of the audience, but I think a lot of it's going to happen not so overtly. So you'll walk into a store and you'll get a push notification. Let's say you walk into Best Buy, right, and you have the Best Buy app. You'll get a push notification saying that this, lumber or whatever you bought last time. No, this plant, right? Let's say you bought like 4 tomato plants last time you were there. Maybe you'll get a push notification saying that like tomato plants are half off today. Or maybe you should get this soil that works really well with the plants that you bought. So interactivity, right? Because the best part about the web is that we get to tell it what we want and it's responsive to that. So I think a couple years ago people did this crazy wacky Germans did a billboard that if you checked into it, dog food would dispense out of it and you could feed your dog if you checked into the billboard. Last year at South by, did anyone go to South by last year? Oh, you guys are missing a great party if you're interested in all this stuff. So last year at South by, Nike released the Fuel Band, right? Who has a Fuel Band? All right. My man is working out over there. So, how are you doing? Are you winning? Are you?
Yeah, my fuel total is 3,000 a day, and I reach it sometimes.
Are you setting the bar like really, really low?
I set the bar in the store. I told them, look, I'm gonna exercise, but maybe not all that often. So my fuel total is how much someone should exercise if they exercise moderately once a day.
This is a 20-year-old male speaking. Maybe you should set your bar a little bit higher. But no, so for last year at South by, they released a fuel ban, and then there's one really, Austin is not a tall city, but there's one really big building in the center of the city, and so Jay-Z played, and they sprayed this rainbow fuel ban colored light up onto the tallest building in Austin, and the more people danced, the higher the light went. So like it was registering all the fuel bans in Austin, and the more fuel people expended, the higher the light went, and people saw it, and the entire crowd of thousands and thousands of people, like collectively, were driving this, basically like progress bar, up this building, right? So making your offline world interactive the same way you expect the online world to be. So what are potential pitfalls to all of this amazing goodness? Well, there's a lot of them. One is just by making things easier to share, or more promiscuous in sharing, does not make it better. Does anyone remember startup Blippy? Of course not. Oh, you remember Blippy.
Shares your credit card purchases, right?
Yes, it shares your credit card purchases. Everyone, when this came out, this was like the hottest thing. It was such a hot deal. I think they raised on like a $12 million cap or something like that. They had no product, and it fell completely on its face. Not the least of which because they accidentally shared some people's credit card numbers, not just what they bought. But people weren't really, the idea of just sort of, it was the ultimate in conspicuous consumption, right? They're like, well, people like to buy Prada and Gucci and Armani and Audi and Mercedes, so of course they're going to want a tool that automatically tells everyone how rich they are. No, it didn't pan out. And then, the other sort of potential pitfalls is, privacy, right? A lot of the stuff around privacy it's not fully baked. This is being decided in real time. Just recently, FTC, I think it's the FTC, is proposing a do not track for mobile apps. Path, I don't know if you guys remember, 8 months ago or so, they got in a big hullabaloo about downloading your address book from your phone. They just paid $800,000 fine for that, which is, not cheap for a startup. But I think, at the end of the day, everyone in this room probably agrees that the opportunity outweighs all of the potential challenges. So with that, I will sort of open it up to questions. Let's start off with proximity or things related to this, and then if you guys want to, we can get into more tactical questions. So you guys had something.
Right, if it's possible, can we get people to ask questions into the mics?
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah. I just want to hit the nail on the head because you walked in here with the question of why isn't your shit working?
Yeah, so I haven't launched anything in the App Store yet, but there have been a lot of location-based apps from Sonar to Everplace, just Foursquare included, just a ton of apps. And some companies seem to get to this kind of plateau where you get to maybe 50 million users and you can't really get to the next level. So what do you think is preventing either the way they acquire users or the way they cross this gap, so to speak?
So there's a couple things in that question. I'll try to unpack them. So in terms of acquiring users, it's what we talked about earlier, right? Like, if Sonar's premise is to share the fact that you're here with the people here, which is inherently difficult to get viral distribution because the way viral distribution works on the internet is about spreading content as far and as wide as possible, whether they're here or anywhere across the earth. And right now there's really no way of driving demand if you're trying to do, distribute. If you're trying to like become big in New York, there's really no way of targeting that type of demand, in the mobile ad exchanges. I mean, you can, but it's really expensive. In general, there's this sort of concept of that was really in vogue about 18 months ago, which is like mobile first. All the VCs and everybody in the startup land was talking about mobile first. We're investing in companies that are like building for mobile, first and foremost, and skip the web, right? A couple of months ago, everyone started going, I don't know if that was right. A lot of VCs. Fred Wilson, he's a very famous VC in New York. He was like, I think we got this one wrong. Because distribution, at least for mobile apps, sucks. And this is a really core thing to think about for anyone that's trying to build a mobile product or a mobile app. Distribution on those apps is generally terrible, right? And it's really easy because if you think about the web and you think about any given web page that you're looking at, there's probably 100 links to other web pages on that page. You're staring at a web page, there's 100 links on it. To get to any one of those 100 links takes you about half of a second, right? Click, boom, I'm at another web page. I'm on someone else's property, right? Think about that compared to mobile apps. Think about first off, any given page you're looking at in a mobile app doesn't have any links to another mobile app. And let's say it does, right? It might have, there's a banner ad or something, right? You have to click on that. Then it takes 5 seconds to get you to the App Store. Then you have to scroll down. Then you have to click install. Then you have to remember your password. Then you have to enter your password. Then you have to hit OK. Then you have to spend 30 to 60 seconds waiting for the damn thing to download. I mean, if you're on Wi-Fi, lucky it'd be 30 seconds. If you're not, it might not even download. Then if it does download, you have to click on it. Then you have to open it up. Then you have to create a password, create an account, and then you're on the page, right? That's a fundamental difference and problem with sort of mobile distribution compared to web distribution. So does that help answer some of the questions? Okay, cool.
What monetization models
You can make Gino hustle. He's
All right.
a great athlete. So.
Thanks, Gino. So what monetization models do you think make sense for proximity-based apps? Either when you're targeting consumers or when you're targeting enterprises? Like, you're obviously adding a lot of value in terms of information you're dispensing or creating. How do you monetize on it?
How do you monetize proximity-based applications
Yes.
or mobile applications in general?
No, proximity-based.
Okay. So my general thing about sort of monetizing mobile proximity-based things is what's unique about it, right? What can you do right here, right now? I do think actually it's going to be connecting people, just facilitating, brokering introductions between people and people around them, or people and things around them. So a great example is Badoo. Is anyone familiar with Badoo? Right? Okay, good. Most people aren't. It's, for those of you that aren't, it's the probably largest social network you've never heard of. It's 170 million people. Started in Russia, early moved to UK. These guys print cash. I think they're going to do over 150 million in revenues this year. They introduce you to people nearby, and they make you pay for it. So that's a pretty good model. Shopkick is, started Shopkick. You guys familiar with Shopkick? It was started at the same time as Foursquare. It was kind of this like bootleg app that you would check into places to get deals. I think I read that they're on pace to do at least 100 million in revenue this year. So they're getting paid, and they get paid by brick and mortar retailers because they provide such good analytics and drive foot traffic. So kind of broadly, I think that if proximity-based technologies enable sort of you to have much better measurement, and so if you can create attributable footfall, i.e. walking someone in the door, that's super valuable. And building models around validating that you connected someone with something or driving traffic to somewhere. Now, Foursquare has tried this. They never got to scale, which is, I think, sort of the tension in this is that it's really hard to build social networks that connect you to like a store, because that doesn't really grow virally, right? So, it's probably easier to build a network first and then connect people to things, or to go B2B and sort of build out some sort of technology. I mean, Walmart, Best Buy, Lowe's, Home Depot, these people all have apps, right? And so the concept of sort of hyperlocal social CRM is definitely coming. So I think there's a lot of B2B opportunities in the proximity space. There's a company called New Air. I think they just got, I don't know if it's public, whatever. They just got an investment from one of the big sort of chip manufacturers. They're building a switch for like connecting devices. So a lot of people are trying to be the brokers of sort of this M2M type interactions. There's probably some money to be made there too.
Going back to your second model of trying to make money from some of these businesses that you're driving traffic to, how much money do you really think is to be made there, right? Because there are a lot of people trying to give these businesses interesting information about their potential customers and trying to get more people into the door. But at some point, they're not going to be able to kind of pay for all the services that are being kind of brought their way, of which there are many. So how much money do you think there actually is without kind of screwing all these businesses over?
Trillions. I mean, I'll make up a number, but like 95% of transactions still occur offline, right? So there's a ton of money there. Just most of the money is there to begin with, right? I don't know if you're talking about specifically like small and medium-sized businesses. Is that where you're leaning?
Yeah, you were talking a little bit about
Well, brick and mortar, I mean, includes big box retail, automotive, CPG, QSR, quick serve restaurants, CPGs, packaged goods, right? Those are all, $100 million, $1 billion companies that are, sell in the real world, right? So there's a lot of money there. If you're speaking specifically about small and medium-sized businesses, that's a different challenge. If you're building a business that is focused on monetizing SMBs, then the only thing you should care about really is how you're going to get this sales distribution. That's going to be like the first question that any investor asks you is like, oh, it's great, you built a widget for restaurants. One is these people are incredibly busy and incredibly focused on the bottom line. So unless you're driving real value and like actually making them money, they're just not going to care. They don't really want analytics on who's checking in today. No, they're like way more worried about like freaking making that omelet and not burning it, and hiring like the waitress that just got pissed off and walked out, right? Like that's what they're focused about. So you can't provide like sort of an ancillary like value proposition to those guys. And then the second question is like, even assuming that you somehow can provide enough value that they actually want to take time out of their busy day to use your service, the second question is like, how the heck are you going to reach small and medium-sized businesses? It's why Groupon and Living Social and those daily deals companies had initial success, is because they created such a crazy, like amazing business model that they could afford to pay these gigantic sales forces to call on small businesses, right? And it was only because their business model for Groupon was so amazing, they got all their cash, up front, that they could sort of front load it. But now you're seeing with, Living Social, and Groupon, both of them, right? Like their growth started to plateau. So all of a sudden they were in danger of like, oh shit, without new money coming in the door and all the costs coming afterward, they almost went out of business, right? Those are the pitfalls of small and medium-sized businesses. I do think you can add I think they're amenable to the idea of, I pay money on the internet and new people walk into my store. They don't want to buy. One thing about knowing about that market is they don't want to buy clicks, right? Like to date, up until Groupon, Living Social, a lot of like web people, tech people that were trying to build services for SMBs were building like tech services for them, like driving people to their web page and things like that. But they don't even know what to do with someone. They're not e-commerce. They're not an e-commerce person. They don't, they're not focused on converting page views into clicks and then a funnel and then driving conversions for some online purchase. They're focused on selling muffins. So that was the promise of Groupon Living Social, was that these guys were doing kind of an implicit sort of cost of customer acquisition versus lifetime value analysis, right? And so the merchant was like, oh yeah, well if they come in and taste my muffin, then of course they're going to come back for more muffins. But the problem was that the sort of the demand driver for Groupon and Living Social was incredibly deep discounts, which was an adverse selection for the audience, right? So it attracted the most cost-sensitive, least loyal people, and so their lifetime value ended up being less than their cost of customer acquisition, and that's why all the merchants were pissed. Now, if you figure out a way of driving loyal customers back to the store, then you'll probably have a good business, but you still got to figure out the sales and distribution part, which is the problem with like Belly and Level Up and all that other crap. No, I mean they're good companies and they're hacking away at it, but it's not easy.
The most common operations that you see on Sonar today? User operations, what are the kind of things that they're likely to do?
Incredibly passive. Most of the time people just leave Sonar on and just observe push notifications, and then much to my chagrin, text message people when they're nearby. Like the best sort of use cases tend to be at events, when traveling. Sonar is great when I come to Boston because I like get reminded passively about all the people that I know in Boston that I forgot about. I wouldn't like go out of my way. Hi, Gino. Sorry. See, exactly. But Sonar didn't tell me. It would have been nice if Sonar told me about you. You're not gonna like look up and email the 100 people that you know in New York next time you go visit New York. But if you're walking down if you're in New York and you get a push notification about a friend that you went to college with or an acquaintance you went to college with that's a block away, you might walk over and say hello. And then like I said, clicking on hot checks is very popular on Sonar, as it is most places on the internet.
Thanks. So I have a question about how you guys avoided the chicken and the egg problem, especially after Color. When you were initially proposing the idea of Sonar, how did you talk to VCs about how you would overcome the chicken and egg problem, and how did you actually overcome it?
Yeah, well, that was part of my pitch deck. So how do you achieve hyperlocal liquidity? And sort of my answer was, build a single player use case, right? So the best part about Sonar is that Sonar works even if no one else in the world is using it, because it sits on top of Foursquare, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and leverages the fact that people are spewing geo-tagged content out on all those networks. And so even if you don't need, the concept of an app that tells you about other people in the room is long fabled and never realized, right? It would work great if everyone else in the world downloaded that app, but no one else does, so all those apps suck. So we avoided that problem by leveraging those other networks. A common, more generified answer to how do you avoid the chicken and egg problem when building a marketplace is that if it's a two-sided marketplace, you provide value to one side of the market and build what they call a single player use case, right? And then once you've aggregated supply or aggregated demand, then you flip the switch and then you flip the switch and create the market. So a really common example of this is advertising networks. So what they'll do is they'll go and they'll provide, Flurry did this. You guys know Flurry? So Flurry went and it provided analytics to app developers, right? So you need analytics, you're building an app, you want to know what your users are doing inside the app. Flurry provides those services for free. So Flurry gets thousands of apps to install its analytics. They're all using Flurry analytics. All of a sudden, Flurry has access to 700 million users. And then they flip the switch and they create an advertising exchange. And so they've already got all the supply side, all the inventory. And then it's really easy to get advertisers who want access to those 700 million people. So that's kind of the standard answer for that.
So you're playing in space that's super cool, but a space that Apple is playing in with Find Your Friends, and Facebook announced this week they're taking another go at a standalone friend finding app. So how do you approach that whole deal that it's these juggernauts are here and it's a increasingly getting crowded space?
Well, so one thing is that like the only answer to that, especially when you're going to try to raise money, is to look people in the eye and say, I'm going to kick the crap out of them, right? Like I'm going to do so much better at this than Facebook or Apple or Google or whatever is doing. I'm not worried about it. So, because at the end of the day, like if you're a small team of really talented people, like, and you're focused on one thing, right? You're only working against a Facebook team of 4 or 5 or 6 people, so you should be able to beat them, right? In general, as for us, how we're handling it, I mean, we have a lot of new stuff coming out in Sonar that actually does a lot of the things I was just talking to this gentleman about in terms of how to monetize. In general, and like general advice is you should be aware of what all the big platform guys are doing, but like don't really, don't lose sleep about it. Don't just focus on building what you want. And if you're building something people want, and if people want it, then like they'll start using it. They're not worried if Apple's doing it. I mean, Find My Friends. If I had worried about Find My Friends, I would have never started Sonar, right? But no one uses that. So I don't know. I think that's like overblown. Another thing that people when they're starting startups or trying to start startups, all get bent out of shape about is like competition. You're worried about like the 20 other, like literally I launched May 2011, and then till South by in 2012, I watched 40 competitors launch. I have this big spreadsheet, 40 different companies, right? And like if I had, it was incredibly stressful, but it was a total waste of time. Every like ounce of time I spent worrying about like Highlight, right? I mean, I remember, like I saw Highlight, like a couple months before from a VC, that I know, and I was like, whatever. We had actually, it's funny, everything I've seen in my space from my competitors, like everything that they have done was something that we had like mocked up or had on our product roadmap, right? It's like everyone's trying to figure it out. Like that's actually how you know that they don't know what they're doing, because like they're doing the same things you're trying to do, and you don't know what you're doing. So that's somewhat comforting, right? You're like, good, they don't know what they're doing either. We still have a chance. But I remember, when Highlight like got all this press and buzz, because they had been invested in by a bunch of like Valley insiders, right? Crunch Fund and whoever, and they just like turned on the press knob. When you start using the phrase, well, then we'll put press on it, you start to realize like the press is this thing that is manipulates and is manipulated by the industry it works on. And I remember I was just crushed at home, right? Just like completely crushed, and I had to like drag myself up off the couch and like go out and then like pitch people and explain for like a solid 2 months about like why are we different than Highlight? Why are we different? Like very core fundamental reasons why we're different than Highlight. Highlight is an app that tells you about people nearby who have the Highlight app, which I already explained why it doesn't really work. 9 months later, like, I don't know, we have like 10 times as many, or no, like 100 times as many daily active users as Highlight. Like, does it matter? Like, no, it doesn't matter. The only thing like that matters for me is like staying alive and making sure and like keeping Sonar growing, right? Like every ounce of thought I spent thinking about those guys, and I met them at South by, very nice guys, but it was a total waste of my time.
How are you currently making money, and how do you see that transforming in the future?
I will tell you in 2 to 3 months. Gonna take a pass on that one.
We want some ideas.
Okay, yeah, I am totally open to ideas. You guys should definitely give me all your ideas.
as far as I know about social proximity applications, like many people generally consider them to be pretty creepy, and they're very reluctant to share their personal information, like even their profile picture or their names or their designation or other, like any personal information out to any random stranger who's, say, 0.1 mile away from you. And the fact that they know that you are 0.1 mile away from them makes you vulnerable for them to reach you. Like like one of my friends said that, like they I don't know what the name of the app was, but like she connected with one guy over this app, and it first said that she's 1.6 miles away, then 0.6 miles away, and gradually she was like inside the store and the guy was outside the store, like trying to figure out where she was. So like in such cases where your own information is like available to all these people who are around you and you don't know what sort of people they are, like people generally tend to get creeped out by such applications and they are pretty reluctant to even share the information. How do you think your idea, like that is Sonar, is going to deal with this or is dealing with this already?
You're definitely not gay. Because there's an app called Grindr that is incredibly popular in the gay community. It's a proximity, it was probably, it predated us. It's the original proximity-based people matching app. And millions of people use it all the time. I know the guy who started it, Joel. So I think that it depends on the context and what people are using it for. One thing that we definitely did when we started was on the spectrum of social to professional. We always sort of, leaned a little bit professional. So we had, no complaints from people about like getting weird messages from people that are kind of weird, freaking them out. I think that leveraging people's real information, Facebook. So if like you have mutual friends with someone and they're creeping you out, like, that you can tell your friend and be like, yo, your friend's being freaking weird. Like, why are you friends with that person, right? So that's sort of that concept of using, online reputation to actually facilitate offline interactions. But people who download and use Sonar are like not, in general, they're not the people that are nervous about sharing. They're people that want to share more. So, and I guess the other part about Sonar is that like it's not like Foursquare where we're telling people elsewhere that we're here. The whole vision behind Sonar has always been just to better facilitate interaction amongst people in this room. So I'm not creeped out that you can see me right now. And if you knew a little bit more about me because of Sonar, it wouldn't bother me. So I just sort of want to like grease the wheels of people already here. So the way Sonar works also is that you can't search for anyone, right? Like you can't like be like, where's my girlfriend right now, right? That's not possible. Sonar only is telling you about people that are very, right around here. So it's kind of like line of sight or like needle in the haystack kind of anonymity, right? You walk around the streets in New York with a general thought that, you're anonymous just because you're out there among so many other people and there's no way to search for you. But that said, it's not for everyone. And I think it's just generally one of those like cultural norms that will probably continue to err on the side of sharing. I mean, in general, I would say that business after business has been built by violating commonly held privacy assumptions, right? Like, oh my God, you're gonna put all my friends on the internet? That's so weird. You're gonna put my resume online? My family photo album's accessible on the web for everyone out there to see? Like those all sound absolutely absurd, right? But that's like, Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook, right? So, I don't know.
You alluded before to the challenges of a pure play mobile strategy. How do you see tablets playing into this field of geolocation apps or services, and particularly with regard to Sonar in the future?
Yeah, I think we're more of a mobile phone type product.
Because mobile is where the users are, but tablets are where the money is.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked. I'm wondering if there's a way to, you plan on molding the two, or you're just going to mobile?
So this is why I asked if he wanted to talk about mobile monetization or just proximity-based monetization. So, like, broadly, I'm not worried about monetizing on mobile. People are always like, how do you make money on mobile? Like, installing AdMob in your app and then hoping to get rich is probably not a good plan. AdMob's a mobile ad network, right? But there's tons of ways of making money on mobile. I mean, first off, buying content inside the app. So, buying filters or buying levels up in games, right? You're like, you don't need to get people's payment information because you can do it through Apple. I mean, people are doing great on that. Badu is making a ton of money with people buying stuff in app. I think, let's see, how to.
I guess what I'm really asking is like how you're segmenting your market right now. Is it by device or is it by demographic?
How do we think about our audience? Yeah, we think about it in use cases mostly. So people that are walking home from work, people that are traveling, people that are at a conference, people that are dating, people that are out at bars for the night. That's tend to be how we segment what we do. And I think that probably extends to a lot of mobile companies, is like thinking about the context in which people are using your application. Is it, college students at bars, or is it moms in coffee shops? And then building your experience and product around that. Yeah. And in terms of mobile monetization, like just broadly, my theory on this anyway has been for a while, which is like mobile monetization isn't here yet because the average sales price on goods purchased via mobile is so much lower than the ASP for desktop, because to date people aren't buying, desktop you're buying like your hotel room and your insurance and all these kind of big ticket items, right? Whereas to date on mobile, you're buying like an app, which is like $1, right? But as sort of mobile payments comes and starts getting after the trillions of dollars in offline spend, I think you're going to see having real estate on people's devices become massively more valuable. Same thing with mobile payments, just m-commerce, right? There's still a lot of friction to date with like entering your credit card on a mobile device, and that's a real pain in the ass. But as payments get more and more baked into things like the OS or into the card, or whenever that friction is removed and it's easier to buy. I mean, I've bought plane tickets on my mobile phone now. I think you're going to start to see, mobile monetization increase significantly. And if you guys want to get into like the crazy world of mobile ad tech, I mean, we can get into that. It's like pretty technical and not for everybody.
I kind of just wanted to follow up on my previous question. What I wanted to really ask was like,
I'm creeping you out still.
No, not a lot. What I'm just wanting to ask, is Sonar taking any extra measures or any like extra precautions to ensure that something like this does not happen? Like is it like doing like, does it have any features, or is there any monitoring or any such reporting going on like in Sonar that can give some comfort to these users so that they're more comfortable using this application?
So if you ever are using Sonar and you feel uncomfortable, you could definitely email me and tell me what's going on. We're definitely like, we are like constantly, people do send in privacy like questions about like, how does this work? Is my information getting shared? Like, can I delete the app, right? And those are things that we sort of deal with and explain, and like we have awesome customer service people, including myself, that are on top of that. To date, there hasn't, like, people have been excited about the opportunity to get more visibility. Like that was always, so the problem we have always been focused on is kind of the opposite, right? It's like, it's annoying to walk into a conference room of 1,000 people and like feel alone and feel like no one knows who you are and feel disconnected from the people that you're so close to, right? So our goal has always been like giving people more voice locally, more so than covering people up. I mean, I think if you didn't want to be noticed, you just probably wouldn't use Sonar at all.
Have you thought about releasing an API?
Yes, we should talk afterward. What do you want it to do?
What do I want to do?
What would you like our API to do?
So that I could build applications on top of proximity-based networks.
Yeah, it's a building them is a pain in the ass. So I would love to help you do that. Yeah. So we'll catch up afterward.
So going to what you mentioned before, VCs originally were looking at mobile, and then they came back and said, oh, wait, that's not the direction we should be going in. Do you think that kind of over time people are kind of going to wake up and just say there's going to be some sort of backlash or some sort of hangover from, hey, we're sharing our proximity way too much, and we all need to kind of just slow down or stop? So I guess a bigger question is, where do you see kind of proximity-based sharing going over the next 5-10 years?
It's not that people were wrong about mobile. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify that. There's no question that mobile is going to be huge. It's just that mobile as a pure sort of distribution strategy, I think, is kind of debunked. I mean, like companies like Vidi, right? They got really like a huge spike. Everyone familiar with Vidi? It's like kind of Instagram for video, right? They got all their distribution because of Facebook, not because they were a mobile device, right? They had like a little hack where if you watched a video, it would just instantly tell all your friends. So that's the point I wanted to make there. In terms of like, is there going to be a backlash? Like, I think things tend to work like this. Like the secular trend is that people are sharing more and more and more, and that we're carrying around sort of sensors, and those sensors are becoming more and more connected with the other sensors around them. So like, that's a secular trend unless, something cataclysmic happens. Like I foresee that happening, indefinitely. That said, right, there's little backlashes, and I wouldn't even call them like steps back, but like the mobile location sharing and location data is like a hot topic on down in Washington right now. And so there's going to be regulation, and with that regulation, it's going to be harder to do some certain things that you couldn't do before. And there's some ad networks on Android that is Android's more permissible than iOS, so you can get easier access to people's devices. And some people are abusing that by doing kind of like spammy things and downloading software to your phone. It's like the toolbar. Remember toolbars? All of a sudden you look up and you got like 50 freaking icons on your Internet Explorer, and you have no idea what's going on, and there's like strange ads popping. I mean, some of that's happening on Android right now. So like, Google is walking the line between the benefits of having a more open ecosystem and the downsides of it. And I think that as a society and dealing with sort of location-based, proximity-based sharing, we will make the choice of, is this providing enough value to us to do it? And to these gentlemen's points, like to date, I don't think people have figured it out. But I think that this year you're actually going to see a lot more persistent, background location enabled applications. One just came out called Moves. It's like Fitbit, but it's just purely an app. That's getting a lot of hype. There's this Y Combinator-backed coupon one that pings you with coupons wherever you go, whenever you're nearby a store. People are using that. So I would look to see way more sort of location-enabled, proximity-based stuff coming before there's a real backlash. The backlash against Highlight because of battery drain was like a little microcosm, tech world problem, first world tech world problem.
So I was just going to follow up on his question with a little bit of a different twist, just asking,
when you look at the sort of mobile, proximity apps, are you getting a bias of a lot of males joining it rather than females? I know you were saying they click like on the like hot female. Is it just the one hot female who's there? And in terms of thinking of that, what are the opportunities for sort of
It's like business school.
monetizing that? Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding, ladies. I knew I was gonna cause problems there.
So what do you think about that in terms of, one, your opportunities to monetize that, and in terms of the users and what you can provide for them? Does it create, have a more tailored, you're trying to create environments that are more, say, events, things that guys are interested in, or are you growing a more neutral platform despite?
Well, there's one thing we've learned about how to make money on the internet. It's about building things that women want. Daily deals companies, majority of them of deals are bought by women, right? Pinterest, which does more referral traffic for e-commerce than Twitter, completely driven by women. So my advice to aspiring entrepreneurs in the proximity space would be to build services for women that enable women to do more things that women want to do. And if any women in here have any ideas, very interested in hearing them. All right. Is that good? Thank you for having me, guys.